August 6, 1930, a Norwegian sealing ship, the Bratvag, anchors off a remote Arctic island that ice seals shut almost every year. This summer, the ice has pulled back. Sailors row ashore to hunt walrus, and one of them notices something odd among the stones, an aluminum lid. Then a boat hook, engraved with the words, Andrea's Polar Expedition, 1896. And then, a man resting against the rock, the letter A stitched into his jacket. He has been there for 33 years. To understand how he came to this island, we have to go back to the beginning. In 1897, the North Pole was the last great blank on the map. No human being had ever stood there, but hundreds had died trying. Britain's Franklin expedition lost all 129 of its men in the Arctic. Others starved, froze, or simply vanished. Because between the pole and the nearest solid land lies the polar pack, a frozen ocean, 2 to 3 meters thick, split by ridges and channels of black water. And it never holds still. The floe you camp on tonight will not be in the same place tomorrow morning. There are no landmarks. There is no rescue. In July, the temperature hovers near zero. By October, it collapses, and the sun disappears with it. Salomon August Andrée believed he had found a way to skip all of it. He would not walk to the pole. He would fly over it. Andrée was 42, chief engineer at Sweden's patent office and the country's most experienced balloonist, with 9 flights in a balloon he called Svi. Calm, stubborn, ruled by numbers. Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite, helped fund his plan. So did the King of Sweden. He chose 2 companions. Nils Strindberg, 24, a gifted physics student and photographer, newly engaged to a young woman named Anna Charlier. And Knut Frinkel, 27, a civil engineer built for hard labor. Into the equipment, Strindberg packed a camera he had constructed himself with film for hundreds of exposures. He intended to photograph the top of the world. None of the 3 had ever traveled on pack ice. The plan looked elegant on paper. A hydrogen balloon launched from Svalbard would ride the summer winds across the pole, and come down days later in Russia, Canada, or Alaska. The balloon was named the Renin, the Eagle, sewn in Paris from varnished silk. It held nearly 5,000 cubic meters of hydrogen. And Andrée added his own invention, 3 heavy drag ropes trailing on the ice below, creating just enough friction for small sails to steer the balloon. In theory, the first attempt in 1896 never left the ground. The winds refused to cooperate. But something more important happened that summer. The expedition's meteorologist, Nils Ekholm, kept measuring the hydrogen day after day, and the numbers kept falling. The balloon was leaking. By his calculations, it could not stay airborne for the 30 days the crossing required. He warned Andrée. And when the expedition regrouped in 1897, Ekholm was gone. He had resigned. Knut Frinkel took his empty seat. Here is why the leak could never be fixed. Hydrogen is the smallest molecule in existence, small enough to slip through openings no eye can see. The Eagle's silk panels were stitched together with roughly 8 million needle holes, and varnish sealed most of them. Most is not all. Hour after hour, the balloon bled lift. Andrée knew the math. But Nobel's money was spent, the newspapers were watching, and all of Sweden expected a hero. So on July 11, 1897, when a steady wind finally blew from the south, the Eagle rose from Danes Island with 3 men aboard. It went wrong in the first minute. The balloon sank toward the bay until the gondola nearly touched the water, and the crew threw out ballast to climb. At the same moment, the lower sections of all 3 drag ropes twisted loose and fell away. More than 500 kilograms of rope, gone. From the shore, it looked like a small mishap. It had just decided everything. Suddenly, far too light, the Eagle shot up to 700 meters, where the expanding hydrogen vented out through the valves. And without its ropes, it could not be steered at all. Andrée's flying machine was now the one thing he had sworn it would never be, an ordinary balloon, going wherever the wind went. On the second day, they released a carrier pigeon with a short message, all well on board. A Norwegian sealer shot the bird and found the note. But by the time anyone read those words, the Eagle was already down. It is the night of July 13, 1897, around 60 hours into the flight. The Eagle hangs low over the pack, wrapped in freezing fog. Mist settles on the silk and turns to ice, gram by gram, kilo by kilo. The men have barely slept in 2 days, and now the gondola begins to touch. Every few minutes, the basket slams into the ice. A jolt, a grinding drag, a brief floating lift. Then the next impact. It goes on for hours. Inside the wicker gondola, there is nothing to do but hold on, listen to the ropes creak, and wait for the next hit. Strindberg and Frankel finally crawl into rest, too exhausted to care. Andrée keeps watch alone. At some point in that gray half-light, he opens his diary and wonders, in ink, whether the men who come after them will call them brave. Or mad. By morning on July 14th, the question no longer matters. The balloon is finished, coated in ice, starved of gas, dragging itself across the frozen ocean. Andrée opens the valves and lets the hydrogen sigh out. 65 hours and 33 minutes after launch, the Eagle folds down onto the pack ice and lies still. The silence afterward is total. No wind in the rigging. No birds. 3 men stand on a frozen sea at 82 degrees, 56 minutes north, beside a machine that will never fly again. The nearest food depot is roughly 300 kilometers away. Their position is unknown to every other person alive. Imagine that for a moment. No radio on Earth can reach you, no ship can find you. And the ground under your boots is drifting. Strindberg does what he came to do. He raises his handmade camera and photographs the collapsed Eagle. Dark against the endless white, his 2 companions standing beside it. One day, this will be one of the most famous photographs in polar history. Right now, it is simply frame 1 of the walk home. They are not panicking. The gondola holds guns, ammunition, sledges, a canvas boat, and food for months. Andrée is calm, almost cheerful. The plan is simple. Haul the supplies east to a depot on Franz Josef Land and wait for rescue. On paper, once again, it works. But the ice has already started to move. They spent a week at the crash site sorting supplies and loading 3 sledges, each weighing over 200 kilograms. On July 22nd, they began to walk. The ice fought them for every meter. Pressure ridges rose like walls of broken concrete. Channels of open water cut across their path. Each one meant the same routine. Unload, ferry everything across in the little boat, load again, haul on. On a good day they gained a few kilometers. On a bad day less. Then Strindberg took their position with his sextant, and the numbers made no sense. They had marched east for days. Yet they were further west than when they started. The pack beneath them was drifting faster than they could walk. For every kilometer they gained, the ocean carried them backwards. They changed course southwest now, toward a smaller depot at 7 Islands. The drift shifted with them, as if the sea were reading their plans. Weeks blurred together. They shot polar bears and lived on the meat. The diaries record cramps, diarrhea, aching joints, and feet that never dried. Frankel's foot gave out entirely, and since no one could be left behind, the other 2 hauled his sledge along with their own. In Sweden, silence turned from weeks into months. Search parties checked the coasts where a balloon might have come down. They found nothing, because no one on Earth knew where the Eagle had landed. By mid-September, the 3 men accepted what the numbers had been telling them all along. They could not reach land before winter. So they stopped, chose a large floe, and built a shelter from snow blocks cemented with poured water that froze into ice. In his diary, Andrée gave it a name. Home. And for a short while there was hope, because the floe was drifting south, fast toward the edge of the pack. Then on the night of October 2nd, the floe cracked directly under the wall of the hut. Their island of ice was breaking apart beneath them. But this time, land was in sight, a pale dome rising from the sea. Kvitøya White Island. A lump of rock buried almost completely under a cap of glacier ice, with one narrow strip of bare frozen gravel. Even today, few human beings have ever stood on it. On October 5th, they ferried what was left of their supplies ashore. After 12 weeks on moving ice, they were standing on solid ground. But it was October in the highest Arctic, and the sun was days from vanishing for 4 months. Strindberg's little almanac, once full of notes, shrank to fragments. A word here, a time there. His last entry is dated October 17th. After that, the pages are blank. Nils Strindberg died first, sometime in mid-October. His 2 companions carried his body to a crack in the rocks and covered it with stones, which means that, at that point, they still had the strength to bury a friend. Sometime after that, days, perhaps a week or 2, no one knows, Andrée and Frankel died at the tent. Andrée's final diary pages were frozen and water-damaged, and the last legible sentences trail off into fragments. There was no one left to write the ending. For 33 years, the ice kept the island closed. Then came the warm summer of 1930. the Bratvag, and an aluminum lid glinting among the stones. The sailors and a second expedition that followed weeks later recovered the remains of all three men, Andrée's diaries, Strindberg's letters to Anna, and rolls of exposed film frozen solid since 1897. In Stockholm, a photochemist named John Hertzberg spent weeks working on the ruined negatives. Of roughly 240 exposures, 93 images could be saved. Among them was frame 1, the collapsed eagle on the ice, 2 small figures beside it, taken hours after the landing. The camera Strindberg built to photograph the North Pole had instead brought home the only eyewitness images of how its owner died. The investigation that followed found no single fatal error. It found a chain of small ones. A leak that was measured, reported, and ignored. Steering ropes lost in the first minute of flight. A balloon that needed 30 days in the air and managed 65 hours. As for what finally killed the men, it remains unclear to this day. One theory blames trichinosis, because parasite larvae were later found in a polar bear carcass at the camp. Others point to carbon monoxide from the stove inside a sealed tent, or to cold and exhaustion. The remains were cremated after the funeral, so the question can never be answered. On October 5, 1930, 33 years to the day, after the three men waded ashore on Kvitøya, the gunboat Svensksson brought them home into Stockholm harbor. The King of Sweden waited at the quay. It became one of the largest funerals in Swedish history. Today, the diaries, the letters, and all 93 photographs are kept at the Grena Museum in Andrée's hometown. One postscript. Anna Charlier, Strindberg's fiancée, waited years before marrying another man. When she died in 1949, her final wish was honored. Her heart was removed and buried in Stockholm, beside Nils Strindberg. 3 men disappeared into the white in 1897. And 33 years later, they told the world what happened in their own handwriting and their own photographs.